What are the key IT integration barriers that prevent sustainability initiatives from scaling?
Digital infrastructure, the digital economy, if you will, represents about 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions right now. It's projected to rise faster and harder than any other industry. The big barriers that we have is just the fact that the landscape is so fragmented in terms of trying to understand where and how we're supposed to comply with the different sustainability metrics. From a technology side, I think it's just a lack of standardization around the platforms and the systems that we use.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on the show, we have Paul Schuster, Managing Director of Sustainability at NTT Data. Paul brings over 20 years of experience helping global organizations align climate goals with operational execution. From reshaping infrastructure and embedding ESG into IT systems to championing digital decarbonization, he's been at the forefront of turning ambition into action. Paul also hosts the 8-Minute Climate Fix podcast and previously founded a sustainability strategy firm, making him a true catalyst for real-world climate innovation. Get ready for an eye-opening conversation on how businesses can lead the energy transition by design. Let's dive in.
Welcome to another episode of TechDogs Discover Dialogues. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on our show today.
Oh, excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me along.
Before we dive into the complexities of sustainability and digital transformation, let's rewind the story a bit, right? Because every leader has a turning point in his career, right? And there's a moment where you try to align your personal goals with your professional ones, right? When I was doing a research about you, Paul, you have dedicated more than over 2 decades into sustainability, right? And how do organizations integrate sustainability into their digital transformation journeys? Right. So, can you please walk us through their journey? Walk us through your journey and what drew you to this space?
Yeah, so I'll actually say I'm probably a little different than most sustainability executives and professionals because I didn't start out with an intention to be a sustainability professional in the first place. I came out of school and I joined a startup. I was one of the founders of a startup that we were just helping utilities manage their cost structures better, in general, right? And at Power Advocate, we achieved some success. I was there for about 10, 11 years or so. And through that process, I found myself working more and more on environmentally related projects. So we would work with coal facilities around mercury control and around flue gas desulfurization to take sulfur dioxide out of the atmosphere, and nitrous oxide out of the atmosphere, and what we could do about that. And so when I left Power Advocate and went to actually work for another company, it was around renewable energy development. And all of a sudden I found myself, focused on building wind turbines and solar farms and helping corporations attach themselves to these large projects and help them finance these projects so that they could drive more renewable energy on the grid. And I said, you know what? I didn't think about it at the time, but my career has really been leading me towards this. And so I was very fortunate to be with these renewable energy teams for a little bit. Eventually found myself transitioning into consulting and worked with Accenture around their energy transition services and what we need to do to get to a cleaner, stable, more resilient grid, and how utilities and corporations and off-takers all need to work together to make that happen. Eventually transitioned into Accenture's global sustainable infrastructure practice, and I led that for a good chunk of time. Right as the Biden administration was starting to flow dollars into that, ended up working for a few consultancies, and then found myself here at NTT Data, of which, if your audience isn't familiar with NTT Data, we're a large information technology services firm, a global presence. We're part of the NTT Group, Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, out of Japan. But NTT Data is kind of the IT services function of that. We are the backbone for the internet in many different ways. We're the third largest data center owner in the world. We provide a number of the different digital tools that people use, and so to be in a sustainability role and in a leadership role within this company is really exciting right now, especially as we transition to an AI driven economy, and as we think about what that means from a climate perspective, an environment perspective, and a social perspective. It's important to us at NTT Data to do so in a sustainable, forward way, and I'm glad to be part of that team to help lead us into that transition.
And you had an inspiring journey, right? And I guess you said that you did not start as a sustainability professional since the start, right? Your career drifted you to you in this direction, and I believe that like it's a really exciting space because everybody wants to speak about sustainability, right? Because the climate change is real, and it is impacting at a very large scale, which we are not even observing. Nobody's even talking about it, and especially with data centers expanding at an exponential rate, newer technologies like AI coming into the picture, I believe there's a humongous toll that is happening on the environment, right? And I'm really glad that companies like NTT are giving focus on this area and trying to shift into clean energy initiatives, right? That's really a great initiative, and more organizations should start looking into this, because we have only one earth, that's our planet, right? And if that's gone, we don't have anything, there's no planet B. That's
There's
what
no
they say.
planet B. Exactly. And
And
we're trying to do our part, both in terms of internally and individually at NTT Data. We have our own, ambitious goals to be net zero in our data centers by 2030, net zero in our operations by 2035, and to cover our entire value chain by 2040. And all of those have been signed off by international standards. There's the Science-Based Target Initiative, which is kind of the gold standard of companies that have to go through a rigorous process to make certain that they align with that. And we're part of the SBTI and have signed off on that. So we've got our own internal standards, but we also are very proud of being able to help our clients and our customers navigate their sustainability journey as well. And really, as I said before, looking at our services as a sustainability forward type of service that we can help process and move our clients along that journey as well.
definitely, and as you said that at least, and it's great that you have a roadmap, right? You have a vision. By this year, we have to achieve net zero emissions and things like that, right? And when and because of your career, you've been more than over 2 decades at sustainability, right? You had been at the center stage of really big transformations that happening, right? Because organizations started taking sustainability into the digital transformation initiatives very recently, right? And you've been at the center stage of all of these initiatives, right? And there's a lot that takes to put your ambitions into scalable actions, right? And in the next segment, we would like to interpret, what are the operational realities and systematic hurdles that you face into building a clean energy future, right? And this transition is just not just about the ambition, right? It's about integrating diverse technologies, right? Making strategic partnerships and also governance models that scale, right? And there's a lot of conversation goes on that sustainability is a team sport, right? It's not an individual task that companies or individuals can take. So from your experience, I would like to ask you, Paul, what role does cross sector collaboration play in accelerating meaningful progress in clean energy economy, and what tends them to succeed or fail?
Sustainability is most definitely a team sport
Mm-hmm.
because we have to rely upon each other to get to the final outcome that we all deserve and we all want, right? And whether that's from a financing perspective, a technology perspective, a people and organizational perspective, down through our suppliers and such, we all need to collaborate and work globally together to answer a global problem, if you will, right? And so certainly, in terms of the challenges around scaling and everything, it's really about that collaboration more than anything. The technology exists, the processes exist. We know what we need to do. The biggest challenge that we have as a society, and our little role to play within that economy, is how do we work together to all strive forward and move this massive needle that we have to move in a positive direction, right? And so that's where everybody brings a different element to the table. All right, NTT Data, we're not going to create new solar farms or wind farms, and we're not going to develop new technologies around carbon capture or nature-based biodiversity options or anything like that. But what we can bring to the table is a really deep understanding around data and empower our community, our global community, around how to use that data in the process of climate action. Right. And so that's a lot of what we try to do. We try to provide that digital backbone. How do we get that data to the point where it's workable and we can actually take action against it? How do we get beyond just, hey, let's measure things for the sake of measuring things, but we can actually do something with that data. And we recognize our own impact upon the globe itself. Digital infrastructure, the digital economy, if you will, presents about 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions right now. It's projected to rise faster and harder than any other industry. And just to put that into context, that's twice that of the aviation industry. So, when you think about our role, both as an enabler of climate action, but also as an industry that needs to do our part to control this, we all have to work together to try to figure this out.
Definitely, I too agree to your point. Like we need to get all together, to one common goal. And to that, you said that it's causing more twice the emissions of the aviation industry. Aviation is already one of the industries that is one of the highest emission houses. That they leave a lot of emissions. And if the industry is doing twice the emissions, it's quite a lot, right? And also, you have mentioned that digital infrastructure and entities' role in data empowerment, right? Can you share an example where cross-sector collaboration helped to move the needle faster? Like any examples on top of your mind?
Let me talk about one example in particular. Okay, and this is really around how financing institutions finance different projects out there in the world, right? They need to have a clear understanding as to the impact that they're going to have, as a bank goes out there and invests behind, say, a reforestation project. And if you're going to invest behind a reforestation project, you want to make certain that those millions of dollars that you're putting to work actually have a meaningful impact around, carbon reduction or offtake or whatever it might be. But in order to do that, the best way to do that is to use satellite imagery to actually scan that type of area, process that data, understand how that's changing, actually put some AI over that so you can actually see the transition over time and temporally. And that's the thing that NTT Data can bring to bear. So now you're actually working across sector where you're working with a reforestation project that needs financing, that needs the data, that needs the satellite telemetry, that needs all of these different components that all have to work together in order to get to an outcome. And maybe that reforestation project goes and sells those carbon offsets to a large technology provider, and we can come full circle in this entire process. But that's where the power of cross collaboration can really showcase what can be done versus trying to answer individual systematized project problems, independently.
Definitely. And I'm just going to circle off the topic a bit, because, I've read an interesting concept about carbon trading, right? and how governments are trying to implement them. So, do you think that if the carbon trading is segmented or drilled down to enterprises as well, where they could have a certain limit of carbon trading, and they could, like, do you think that'll be a potential solution to keep a track and reduce down the carbon emissions?
So that is such a nuanced question, or it's going to require a very nuanced answer, Nikhil, because certainly it is a tool for us to think about in terms of emission reduction, where we can drive incentives for companies and countries
Mm-hmm.
to lower their carbon output as they go forward. So Article 6.4 out of the Paris Agreement actually commits countries who have signed to that agreement
Mm-hmm.
a certain ramp down around their carbon emissions, and so we need the tracker to manage that, and we need the different mechanisms and the digital mechanisms to make that happen. But more so, it gets nuanced when you start talking about how to actually operationalize something like that. How do you start to put in place the assurances? How do you start to put in place the quality tracking? How do you start to ensure that you're not double counting, different offsets as you go forward? And so there's still a lot of work that we need to do. I think, hypothetically, theoretically, academically, whatever the right synonym is that I am searching for there, what we're trying to do is really remarkable at scale. And you can just see, in that small example where, yes, this is going to have an impact, but there's a lot that needs to be done in order to make that foundation actually work.
Definitely. And as you said about operationalizing these initiatives, right? So my next question to you would be, today many companies, and most majority of them, right, are tracking their ESG metrics, right? But only few of them are able to operationalize them, right? So how do you work with clients to ensure that their ESG metrics are not just compliance driven, right, but operationally embedded into their IT system?
Yeah, such a good question. All right. And I think you've touched upon, really kind of the changing tenor of sustainability within corporate America, at least, but corporations globally as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time, sustainability really was kind of a compliance driven game, right? Like, I went to a conference earlier this year where we all sat around, and somebody talked to me, and he was like, if I'd known that this was going to be my career coming into sustainability, I didn't realize I was going to be an accountant for the rest of my life. And that's kind of how sustainability has been perceived, right? But sustainability didn't start that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sustainability started was as an operational value add into a corporation. And many times it was driven by ROI, where we were trying to reduce waste. We were trying to reduce the energy that we were consuming. We were trying to shift from high cost fossil fuels down to lower cost solar or whatnot, and reduce the amount of water that we're using. A lot of what the principles that we use in sustainability have an impact upon operations. In fact, we look at 400 very distinct operating levers that a IT organization can use, when they're thinking about sustainability, and 90% of those operating levers have a return on investment within the first year. Sustainability is an operating metric that we can actually drive real return for our clients, right? And so when we talk about embedding sustainability into, the IT systems and avoiding it being just a compliance driven mechanism, that's the conversation that we have with our operating partners. So that's the conversation where we can sit there and say, we're going to drive real efficiencies for you, but we're going to do so through a sustainability lens, because it doesn't have to be just an altruistic outcome. We're actually driving.
And Paul, like we already had discussed about, like setting up ambitions, right? Like, as you said that you want to achieve, net zero emissions by a certain year, right? The ambition is great, right? But the execution gets real, and it really gets messy. Like when you start to operationalize this and then get into the execution part, right? So I would like to know, and audience would like to know more, what are the key IT integration barriers that prevent sustainability initiatives from scaling?
It's a great question. All right. And I think that for the most part, we're still in the low hanging fruit era, where we can tackle a lot of things over the course of the next couple of years that are going to have meaningful, sizable impact upon our emissions. But if I were to think about the actual challenges around trying to operationalize this, I'd probably think about it from a people process technology perspective, right? There's a people element, which we need the strategies that map to the corporate objectives, right? We at NTT Data, we want to grow, we want to scale, we want to shift over to AI. We can do that in a sustainable growth fashion. By emphasizing operational efficiency, we can do that in a way that maximizes how we grow through a sustainable fashion. We need to make certain that our team and our stakeholders all understand what we're trying to do so we can all march forward in the same fashion. And then from a process perspective, right now, the big barriers that we have is just the fact that the landscape is so fragmented in terms of trying to understand where and how we're supposed to comply with the different sustainability metrics. Certainly there's one set of metrics over in Europe with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, that our European businesses need to comply with. There's a separate set of metrics here in North America that we have to comply with, and without clear federal guidance, that tends to look different state by state here in the United States. And so, there's 50 different regulatory policies that we have to look at. There's a huge challenge just in terms of like how we account for things. The greenhouse gas protocol, which is kind of the accounting standard that everybody uses to measure their greenhouse gas emissions, is going to announce a change over the course of the next 12 months around how they account for emissions. And that could unwind all the activity that we've done depending upon which direction they go. So there's a lot of fragmented standards that is kind of a barrier here. And then from a technology side, just to finish that off, Nikhil, I think it's just a lack of standardization around the platforms and the systems that we use, the data that we use. Again, a big part of what we do at NTT Data is to try to come in and help our customers understand where the data sits in their organization and pull it together in a way that they can actually take action on and not spend all their time just collecting on.
So, Paul, you touch based on, how, ESG data is, and data platforms are fragmented, right? All the data is all over the place. There are different compliances that, organizations have to follow, right? Plus like making rules is one thing, enforcing them is one thing, and then tracking them is one thing, right? So how do we ensure that, there's a standardization in the enforcement, the tracking, and how do we accumulate data? Because it's, at the end, as we said, right, it's one Earth, not North America, not EU, and not APAC as a different segments, right? All these continents need to come together and work towards one mission, because at the end, the emissions are done in each and every continent across. So how do we approach standardization in this process?
So I think there are different levels that we should be talking about there, right? One of which is at a country and a nationalization level, where coming together and creating one standard as a globe around what we're going to hold ourselves to and move forward. That's really what the Conference of Parties, or the COP, that many people have probably heard of, really works towards, and really aligning us as a global community towards some of those standards. Now, do we wish they would move faster? And do we wish it would be a little simpler in terms of understanding what exactly they want us to do? Absolutely. All right. But that's the challenge with getting, 150 plus countries together in a room and having everybody with a voice and everybody with a different opinion in terms of how we're going to move this planet. That said, companies can't sit back and wait for those standards to emerge. All right. In a certain sense, it's very much, hey, let's start walking in the right direction. And as they start to pave the road in front of us, we will actually start to, figure out what exactly the actual path is going to look like. But we don't have to stay here while they're trying to pave that road. We can actually start to move on our own, right? And that's where companies need to look at their own standardization of data and their own standardization of their commitments and their ambitions, and understand what it is that they want to get out of sustainability. Work to align their technology and platform and data to actually manage that, and come together so that they can at least start to move in this in a direction, because that's going to be the most powerful.
For sure, Paul. And like we also covered on the part of like people, process, and technology are two different aspects of that, and all of them are integrated with each other to ensure that the goal is achieved, right? So I would like to ask you a question, follow up question on that is how, when facing skill gaps, right? Skill gaps is one thing, then there'll be processes hurdles that will come over the time, and the third part will be there'll be technology integration challenges that will come across, right? So how do you help organizations to help a momentum by aligning all of these three: people, process, and technology, to ensure the sustainability goals are achieved?
Yeah. So, kind of the core as to what we talk about with our clients is really around design for sustainability. I think I mentioned earlier that when we're just putting sustainability on top of whatever we're doing, it gets lost in the process, right? It can't just be a nice to have that's kind of the frosting or the cherry on top of a cake. All right, it really needs to be embedded into the batter of the entire cake that we're trying to build. And so we do that through design for sustainability. And we'll actually work with our clients when we're solutioning a new network, when we're solutioning a cloud migration or a new data center. We'll actually embed sustainability into the actual product and solution that we're talking about, to sit there and say, how do we start to push this thing forward, right? And what we find there is that uncovers some of that people, process, technology issues that we were addressing. If there's a process challenge, for instance, a lease agreement to come into one of our data centers that requires backup generation. We don't want that backup generation to be dictated to be diesel generation. Like, maybe we can use that backup generation to be a battery or some other storage device that we can use instead, right? If we're talking about cloud migration, and we're talking about, like, how do we measure the impact, not only on an economic side, but an environmental and sustainability side, we want to embed some of those operational software into the overall solutioning set and everything. So that's the way that we're thinking about it, is let's design for sustainability versus coming back on afterwards and seeing what we can do later.
Exactly. Valid point that you made, right? Like sustainability services by design, the sustainability should be integrated into the design, not look at it as an afterthought, right? And I believe that many of the organizations right now also looking at it as a compliance driven metric. Like, the government is enforcing you to meet a certain set of sustainability, ESG metrics, right? What is the best, like, I mean, because like energy production is one, like, because all of these techs, right, like, let that be AI, even data centers, right, require a huge amount of energy to suffice them, the energy requirements that they require, right? What do you think is the best possible alternative to the current solutions like that we are using right now? What is the best possible alternative, and what has the like what source of energy creation has the minimum impact on the environment, and what are the latest innovations and trends that are happening in this sector?
Yeah. So really great question. All right, and certainly the growth of AI is one of limitless possibility that I think all of us should be excited about. But it also comes with real challenges to try to limit its impact upon our planet, right? AI can be a great enabler for us to figure these solutions out, by the way. But, broadly speaking, we know that it's going to be an energy intensive,
Technology.
technology, right? So we know that we need to do something different, right? There are two different elements to that. One of which is, how do we bring more clean energy onto the grid to offset some of that load, and to make certain that as we bring new data centers on and new AI empowered technology on board, we're doing so in the cleanest way possible, right? And so what we need to do is we need to reduce the regulations within certain areas. We need to increase our transmission capacity. We need to make it easier, not more difficult, to bring solar and wind. And to be honest, I think 90% of the conversation has been around what do we do to build more generation and build more renewable power. The other side of the equation that I think doesn't get as much focus is what do we have to do to reduce the power that we're already using, right? So within the data centers that we already have, how do we maximize their capacity? How do we increase their efficiency? How do we reduce the power that's already being consumed so that we can fit more into what we already have, right? And that can be a powerful tool as well. We're talking with companies right now, not only in terms of improving the power usage efficiency within our data centers, but also thinking about how do we tie into networking devices at an individual residential unit or a commercial building or something, a thermostat, for instance, to be able to modulate those thermostats and reduce load on the grid as our data center is increasing its power usage, et cetera. So we're doing a one-for-one trade-off here around some of these types of things. Maybe we don't need to bring new power on. We just have to be smarter about the power that we're already using.
And because sustainability, as discussed, we've been discussing, it will not scale without leadership, without a vision, without an ambitious goal out there, right? And it is all, as we discussed about people, process, and technology. It is more often related to the mindset, right? The culture and the strategic clarity from that drives long-lasting impact, right? So in the next segment, we will like to try to focus on what leadership advice would you give, for business leaders who are trying to integrate sustainability into their operations. So, what advice would you give CXOs, right, who are aiming to embed sustainability into their digital transformation roadmap?
But you could probably guess what my answer is going to be at this point, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's that sustainability is not a burden on an organization, right?
Exactly.
Sustainability is a scalar, it's enabler, it's rocket fuel underneath you. Probably not rocket fuel, sustainable rocket fuel underneath your organization to drive it forward and achieve the growth that you want. Okay, sustainability is a core fundamental principle that everybody should be using.
Glad you made the point that it's a e-fuel, right? Not a fuel, but e-fuel, with less carbon emissions. And let's end this segment with something that is more personal, that something every leader tuning in today might learn from. What's the biggest leadership lesson you've learned from driving sustainability within a large organization like yours?
I think my answer is probably not going to be as specific to sustainability as it is towards leadership, right?
Definitely.
In the fact that we're in the business of change, and we're in the business of helping the organization change, hopefully for the better, as we embark upon this journey. And so you can't really change from the top; you have to change from inside. And you do that through humility, you do that through honesty, you do that through transparency, and you approach each of these conversations with your stakeholders with an open mind to sit there and say, like, what can I learn? How can I help? Right. I had a conversation this morning with a team that was a little, they were questioning, what exactly the value proposition for sustainability was, and whether they should bring us into different conversations. And we sat there and said, look, we're here as a support. We and my team here in North America, our global team underneath David Costa, who's our chief global sustainability officer, we exist here as a support. All right, and how we can best influence you is to and help your clients is for us to be part of these conversations, and for us to help articulate our value proposition the best way that we can. So you do it with humility, you do it with honesty. You lead from the middle, versus from the top.
Definitely. Thank you so much for, like you mentioned, humility, patience, clarity, and all of that, right? And from boardroom humility to business model reinvention, right? It's very clear that sustainability demands both system thinking and emotional intelligence, right? But before we let you go off today, Paul, from this episode, I would like to lighten up the entire, because we've discussed about really impactful conversation right until now, where
It's a heavy topic area to talk about sustainability and climate change. Let's lighten it up and change it around a little bit.
Exactly, and then I would like to end it up on a lighter note, where our audience could get to know Paul beyond your title, your designation. They know you as a leader. So are you ready for a quick rapid fire round that we have?
You know what? I've been looking forward to this. Let's run it through, Nikhil. Let's do it.
Definitely, and no second thoughts. Whatever comes to your mind, is accepted. One travel
Okay.
destination you've always wanted to get lost in with no GPS allowed.
Get lost in with no GPS. You know what? Anywhere in Europe, just parachute me in to the middle of some countryside in the middle of Italy, and let me see what I can do. I would love that.
Definitely, Europe is one of the beautiful landscapes that ever exists on the entire planet. What's one movie you can quote almost entirely from your memory?
Oh, that's a great question. All right, so this is going to date me a little bit, but I grew up watching the Disney movies, and the Disney movie that stuck with me was the Robin Hood animated version with the fox and the bear and all that. I could quote that movie for you straight on through. I must have watched that 100 times when I was a kid, and probably another 100 more now that I'm an adult with kids of my own.
One creative hobby you would like to master overnight. What's your pick?
I have been trying to master how to play the guitar for 15 years now. All right, and probably even longer, and I still can't do it. All right, if there's something like I would love to be able to figure that out, and that's probably one of those hobbies that I'm never going to be able to actually get to the end of.
Definitely. And if you could time travel for a day, right? Past or future, where are you landing?
Time travel for a day, past or future. Oh shoot, can I answer that twice?
Yes, please.
Because I feel like I would love to go into the past
Uh-huh.
and see what the world looked like, 100, 200 years ago,
Mhm.
and really, really absorb what that environment, looked like. And then from a sustainability perspective, I'd love to go 100 years into the future and figure out how we did.
Uh-huh. Definitely. You know, if this question would have been asked to me, I would like to go back to when Nikola Tesla existed, and I would like to learn a lot because he was the master of, you know, uh, and I would like to learn more about him, his ideologies, what he's learned, and, how do you execute or put that in reality, in
I
past
love
time.
that answer. I love that answer. That's a great answer.
A beach picnic or a mountain bonfire? What's your chill zone?
I am not a beach guy. I'm going to go with the mountain. My
Mountains,
my
definitely.
wife my wife covers off on the beach side for me.
One last fun question I would like to end up with. If aliens land and ask you for snacks, what would you serve them?
You know what? Everyone in the entire universe should have an Oreo at some point in time. All right, so let's break out the Oreos and make certain that they take them back.
That's really nice. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Discover Dialogues, Paul. Huge thanks to you for bringing such clarity and perspective to one of the most urgent topics of the time, that's sustainability. And I'm really like, that's the prayer from bottom of my heart that everyone should consider it as their own priority at an individual level as well, and at an enterprise level as well, to ensure that we save our planet for the future generations to come. Any parting words that you have, Paul, before we back up?
No, I appreciate you bringing me on. All right, I
Mhm.
appreciate the opportunity to amplify, NTT Data's voice as well in this conversation. Like we've mentioned a couple times, right? We do this through communication, transparency, and the more that we can talk about what individual role that we all play within it, the better we're going to be in terms of collaborating together.
Thank you so much for your time, Paul. It was a pleasure to host you today. And I got to learn a lot, right? And as I said, sustainability is one of the topics that are closer to my heart. And definitely people like me and more audience gets value to drive away from this episode.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.